Collecting Modernism here at Charleston in Lewes is this wonderful exhibition. It's a collection from 4 different people, 4 different queer men, and it is really representing modernist art from the late 19th century up to the mid-20th century, but it's not an academic show. It doesn't represent every single artist's movement. It represents the taste of the 4 collectors that are involved, and it gives a very personal reflection of their lives and their work and their passions. So the collection today is called the RADF collection, but it starts with Eddie Sackville-West. And he was an aristocrat. He inherited Knoll in Kent, this huge rambling country house. And he was really interested in the contemporary art of his time. He was born in 1901. So artists from the 1920s and the 30s, the neo-romantics. And he bought a lot of those works. He got friends like Duncan Grant to help decorate his apartments at Knoll, and they were lined with the paintings of his collection. Now, he had a really good friend called Eardley Knollys, and when Eddie died, he left his collection to Eardley. Eardley was also a collector, and he was also a gallery owner. So these 2 collections came together. Now, Eardley met a young man called Mattei Radev, a Bulgarian immigrant in the late 1950s, and they became really, really close friends as well. And Eardley helped Mattei become a picture framer and set him up in business. And Mattei had these wonderful connections with artists that he was working for, and he also started buying works too. When Eardley died, he left his paintings all to Mattei. Mattei's civil partner, Norman Coates, then inherited the collection from Mattei, and now he is the owner of this collection. It's through his generosity that we're able to see that collection here in Lewes today. What I really like about this exhibition is that the works are very accessible. Not only the types of work that the artists were making, but the size. They have this wonderful domestic feel, and they were bought to hang in the collectors' homes. These are the works that they really loved, and the works that they woke up to, and the works that they saw every day. These are all painted in the north of France at the end of the 19th, beginning of the 20th century. And you can almost smell the sea, you can sort of hear it crashing against the cliffs. And these were all bought by Eardley Knollys, so he had this real interest in this period of art. So the earliest piece here is by Eugene Boudin, and it's a really typical example of Impressionist work. He's painted it out of doors. He's capturing the sort of the mood of the sky and the naturalistic colours. And then as we move around the wall, you'll see the influence of post-Impressionists coming in, how you're suddenly looking at a scene through the artist's eyes, how the colours are becoming more vibrant and the shapes becoming looser and the brushstrokes becoming much more instinctive. There aren't many portraits in the RADF collection, apart from the ones of the collectors. But here are 2, and this one is one of my favourites in the collection. This is by Modigliani, and it's of his really good friend, Sottine. It's got a wonderful use of line, and you can see that friendship maybe in the portrait. So most of the works in the RADF collection have really good provenance. We know who they're by, and who owned them, and where they were bought from. But this one, this is attributed to Edouard Manet, and it was bought by Eardley Knollys during the Second World War at an auction. And as yet, it's still in that limbo. We'd love to get it sort of fully certified that it's by Manet, but at the moment it can only be attributed to. So it's a wonderful mystery still waiting to be solved. So this is a very personal collection, and it reflects the taste of the collectors. And so you get a bit of a jump from post-Impressionist works to these more colourful abstract pieces. We've got this Jelensky from 1916. He did a whole series of works of the same landscape, but in a portrait format. And each one has a very subtle variation in colour and pattern to it. And then we have Colette Belaise, one of the few women artists in the collection, and she showed at Eardley Knollys Gallery in the late 1930s, and there were several of her works in the collection, though this is the only one that remains. This section ends with the big name in modernism, Pablo Picasso, and there are 2 works by him in the collection. There's this lovely, very sensitive portrait of his son dressed as Harlequin from the 1920s, and then a later still life. This is a painting by the Irish artist Roderick O'Connor, and he moved to France in the late 19th century because he was really excited by the developments that were happening there. But you wouldn't really seen a painting like this in England at that period. And it wasn't until Roger Fry, a Bloomsbury group member, put on an exhibition at Manet and the Post-Impressionists in 1910 that saw all these exciting French paintings come over to Britain for the first time en masse. And you had Van Gogh and Gauguin and Cézanne, and this show was really revolutionary. For artists like Vanessa Bell and Duncan Grant and these young artists, it was really liberating, and they saw there were exciting new ways of making art. This part of the exhibition is pretty much dominated by the Bloomsbury group artists Vanessa Bell and Duncan Grant. They had really strong friendships with the collectors. There's a lovely nude by Duncan Grant, and they were really close friends, but also lovers for a while. There were paintings by Vanessa Bell from early parts of her period where she's really exploring post-impressionism in this incredible still life, and later works. So there's a beautiful view of Venice and another still life of Lemons, where she sort of developed a more solid feel as the 20s and the 30s progressed. I'm going to talk about two sculptors. So on my left is a work by Henri Gaudier-Bresca. Now, he came over to London about 1912, and he did this beautiful sculpture of the artist Nina Hamnet dancing. You can feel the music in the air, you can feel Stravinsky. She's sort of really in touch with her inner spirit, and she's expressing it through her body. And we also have a painting by John Banting of the sculptor Stephen Tomlin. Now, Stephen Tomlin was almost like the Bloomsbury sculptor. He did a portrait bust of Virginia Woolf, of Lytton Strachey, and Eddie Sackville-West commissioned him to do one of Duncan Grant. And you can kind of get a sense of Tomlin's sensuality and why he was such an attractive figure to this group. This is one of my favourite paintings in the exhibition. It's by a British artist called Robert Medley, and he painted it in the late 1950s, but it's based on a painting from about 1490 by an Italian painter called Luca Signorelli. Now, the original painting was in Berlin, and during the Second World War it was destroyed in a fire and the painting was completely lost. So Robert Medley had a black and white postcard of the painting. He'd never seen it in the flesh, and he used this postcard to recreate the painting. It's got this wonderful expressive quality to it, looking back to post-impressionism, but also very much a post-war use of the body, this sort of broken, fractured figures across the picture plane. This is a work by one of the collectors. This is by Eardley Knollys, but he didn't start painting until the 1950s. So he had been dealing with art, buying art, collecting art, and he had this real passion that he wanted to make art. And you can see all the influences coming through of the works that he loved in his collection. You can see this is an English landscape with its really hot colours of post-impressionism coming through. So in this final gallery, we have a lot of British artists from the 1920s and 30s. And they were a generation of artists that were really interested in looking at British landscapes and British scenes and exploring British folklore and traditions. They were inspired by artists like Alfred Wallace, who was working in St. Ives. He'd been a fisherman, and he would just use household paints on bits of old cardboard and capture the world that he knew and the scenes that he saw. And there was this naivety and this honesty in his work that really appealed to these young artists that were coming through at that time. Winifred Nicholson was part of a group of artists who worked in St. Ives, and she did these beautiful, almost delicate works, this still life on a windowsill with the curtains behind. And so she's referencing sort of European influences, but placing it very much within a British environment. So this is the last work that Mattei Radev bought for the collection. It's by a Scottish artist called David Harkins, who now lives in Brighton. And it's a rare sort of abstract piece. We don't have many of those on display in the exhibition. The collection is still growing. Norman Coates inherited the collection from his civil partner, Mattei, and Norman continues to add to the collection. This is a recent acquisition by Jankel Adler, who was a Polish artist who escaped Nazi persecution in the 1930s and came to work in Britain. It's such a wonderful thing to have the Radev collection at Charleston Lewis, to have these works that are normally in a private house on public display and for people to be able to come and enjoy them and to really get a sense of the collectors and their tastes and the lives that they led and also the history of art that this collection represents.